Welcome to Corks Conversation with Matt Witten.
I really enjoyed his book, Kathy. It's called Killer Story, and I can't wait to ask him all about it. It
Isn't it?
really, yeah, it's a cool cover. And
It's
with
a
the
cool cover.
microphone, see, look, I'll reenact it right here. If you're watching on
Yeah.
YouTube, I'm reenacting the cover. And anyway, it does skirt around a few moral questions to do with both journalism and podcasting. So, but that's not an issue for us, of course.
No, absolutely not. As long as we stick to fiction, we're going to be just fine.
Okay.
So, before we get started in our conversation, I really want to tell everybody about Matt. He is a TV writer, novelist, playwright, and screenwriter. He has written for many TV shows that you have heard of, listeners, including House, Pretty Little Liars, one of my favorites, CSI Miami, and Law and Order. His thriller novel, The Necklace, came out from Ocean View Publishing last year to great success, and it's been optioned for film by Leonardo DiCaprio. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's an up and comer. His latest thriller that we're talking about today is Killer Story, and it's about a true crime podcaster. It comes out on January 17th. Matt also has written four amateur sleuth novels that were published by Signet, including a Malice Domestic award-winning Breakfast at Madeline's, and he has been nominated for two Edgars and an Emmy. He is currently writing a drama pilot for NBC, as well as a Hallmark mystery movie based upon the novel A Dark and Stormy Murder by Julia Buckley. He's very busy, so we're really lucky he got to fit us in today. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, Christy.
Hi. Nice
It's
to
so
see
great to
you.
have you. And like we were just discussing, you have a lot on your plate.
Yes, yes. So
So,
go
yeah,
ahead.
Christy, go ahead.
I was going to say, normally well, this is the point where we talk a little bit about the wine, but it is January. And so I am attempting to do dry January. So I have actually, I don't
What
know
do
if
you
you guys can
have?
see this. It's reflecting.
I see rosé.
Can you hear a bunch of kids yelling?
Yeah.
Yeah, I might have to go out to outside my door and tell these people. I don't know who's in the hallway, but it's Geisen zero dealcoholized rosé, and I'm sorry you
Oh,
can't see it,
interesting.
but it's dealcoholized.
How do you
Yes. I know
de-alcoholize?
you can't even say it, and I
I
mean,
can't even say
and
it.
I
I'm gonna
haven't
have to
had
try it. Let's do
alcohol, and I can't say it. So yeah,
it.
but it is pretty tasty. It is tasty. So if you guys ever want to try it, um,
Interesting.
you know, uh,
Sounds
I'm,
good.
screw top
what
to
are you
it.
having, Matt? Are you having a beverage today?
Yes, water with a slice of lemon.
Nice.
Oh, very nice.
The best.
I'm having my favorite afternoon Perrier on ice,
Oh, nice.
even though it's freezing here.
Okay.
I was going to make tea, but I was worried about, I wanted a little green tea, but I don't want caffeine. For me, this is late in the day here. So I'm just having some water.
Right.
Right.
Right. Okay, so let's get on with the questions. And before I
Yeah.
do, I want to tell a little bit about the book itself. So this book it follows a young journalist. Her name is Petra Kovac, and I believe that's her name pronunciation. It's a book, so I can
No,
say
that's
it the way
good.
I want, right?
No, well
But
done.
anyway, she launches a true crime podcast, and she's trying to investigate the murder of this alt right YouTuber that she just happens to have been very close with and thought of her like a younger sister even. And so she starts going into this, and in order to have good ratings, she kind of does some kind of shady stuff. I mean, she's supposedly really trying to get to the bottom of the murder, and I kind of feel like she is, but at the same time, a lot of things are questionable on whether they're even legal, and causes a lot of problems for both her work, her love life, and her reputation. So anyway, but the whole time she's going to catch this killer to kind of redeem herself. So the question I have, this book, like we mentioned earlier, it really shows the dark side of investigative reporting. So I'm wondering two things. One, has traditional journalism really come to the point where the story is like more important than getting to the bottom of the facts? And number
Well,
two, if that's right, then what's causing it? Social media or what?
well, first of all, just thank you so much for that description of the book. I loved it. That was so
Oh,
good.
thank
I'd
you.
like you to
I
come with
love,
me
but
on
I love
my.
reading it, so it was easy to
Yeah,
describe.
Christy is available. You can just bring her along on your tour.
I would like that. I would like that very much. Um, you know, journalism is having such a tough time. I read a statistic last week that really amazed me, which is that every week, two newspapers in America United States, are going out of business. I mean, stunning. I had to read that, 5 times to make sure I got it right. Two a week.
Wow.
And we've lost, I think the stat was a quarter of our newspapers, and it's predicted that by the time another 5 years rolls around, we'll have lost a third. Uh, we lose so many journalists. I believe we've lost 28,000 journalists lose their job per year is the number that I remember. It's just a terrible situation. And I just know so many people who are in journalism who have been laid off. A guy I know, Will Doolittle, works for a terrific small town newspaper in upstate New York called the Glens Falls Post-Star. And when he started 20 years ago, they had 50 reporters, and now they have 8 reporters. So
Wow.
it's a very, very difficult field to succeed in. And yet, so many people are still getting into this field. I know so many people in their 20s with so much passion and so much desire to become journalists, and they have a drive for it, the same way that we, the three of us might have to be writers. They have that drive to be journalists. So it just amazes me that people do this, and it impresses me, and it's still so difficult. It's so easy to lose your job. And newspapers and internet outlets and any kind of journalism outlets, it's so easy for them now to know exactly how many people are reading the article. You
Mm.
just look at those clicks. So now it's very obvious. Okay, uh, only 4 people clicked on this article about a local school board meeting, but 2,000 people clicked on an article about the Kardashians or whatever it might be.
Ugh.
Well, okay, then you want to have the article about the Kardashians. And, on the one hand, this is good. It means you do a better job of giving the consumers what they want. But on the other hand, there's obviously some issues too. So, these journalists of any age, but journalists have such a tough time now because they have to show their worth. They have to show, look, I
Interesting.
got 100,000 people clicking on my story, and
Hmm.
so that's great. I'm a star, and so in that situation, it really is so super important to get clicks that you see in the headlines that people write. And, obviously the word clickbait is what's
Hmm.
used here. The headlines that people put on articles often are not exactly completely honest, really. And I believe that people sensationalize stories even more than they used to because there's so much pressure on them. There's so much incredible pressure on them. So, this is true for
Interesting.
podcasts too. If you want to have a successful, true crime podcast, and maybe you stick straight and narrow to the truth, and maybe the truth is really, ambiguous in a way that's not like fun ambiguous, but just like, well, we don't really know, you know, and it's just not going to get you many listeners. Whereas if you have a podcast where it really feels like, oh my God, these people are getting to the truth and they're discovering new stuff, amazing stuff about these people. Every single week I get to tune in and it's amazing. Then you get a shot at millions of clicks. And if you get that, then you get a shot at making serious money as a podcaster and having that kind of fame translate into your success in other journalism fields as well.
Hmm.
So the motivations now are such that yes, I think there's a tremendous motive to care about clicks more than one cares about the truth. And
Hmm.
obviously, journalists get into the field because they care about uncovering the truth. I mean, maybe journalists also want to be famous too. You imagine yourself, on CNN and like, being up
Yeah.
there. So, that's part of it. But so that's kind of the tension of the book, like the main character says she wants to do good in the world and also be famous. Well,
Right.
actually, two of the characters say that,
Yeah.
and that's her thing. So yeah, I think there's,
It's really
you
interesting.
know, I just think there's so much motivation, you know, to have your kind of
Mm-hmm.
dark side come out in this way.
Yeah.
One thing that I thought was really great and a huge compliment to you is that Hank Philippi Ryan blurbed your book. And she is a lifelong investigative reporter with tons of credentials. And her take on this was that Killer's story is authentic and all too realistic, a deep dive into journalists' tactics, ambitions, and cutthroat passion. And so I just thought that was a major compliment for you that you caught that um that zeitgeist, of, like you say, the competition and the passion, but also the pressure on them. And there's also been so much pressure in the last few years. Now already, the pressure on journalists as far as clickbait and all that stuff. But then I think there have been a lot of attacks on journalists that we haven't seen in a long time. And
Right.
so, and the questioning what is truth and what is,
It's so hard
that's
because, like,
that's
yeah,
fascinating.
I mean, and even reading the book, I was, there were points where, you just get frustrated. You're like,
Mhm.
why
Yeah.
does this have to be this way? But then it is, and you know how it is in the world. And it's just like people don't even care to know the deep truth. They just want to know quick, tell me what it is. And it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if it's true or not. And then they go on, and then, this false information gets out there. And yeah.
Fascinating. It's a great
It, it's
premise.
very tricky because I know when I listen to podcasts, I like the excitement too. I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, and I like that drive too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
see it's me they're trying to
I
get,
know. And now
to
I'm
click
starting
on
to
it.
rethink a lot of the true crime. I'm like
Yeah.
going, did they really go into this as much as they should? Because they had me believe in this person or that person. And the same with like documentaries on TV too, actually, now when you
Yeah.
think about it.
Yeah.
If you're interested, if you want to study more on the subject, there was a pretty famous documentary on TV 3 or 4 years ago called "Making a Murderer." It's actually one of the things that inspired Killer's story, and boy, it made a pretty convincing case that maybe this one dude was innocent, and maybe this other guy was innocent too. Well, then after it came out, podcast, then you read some of the stuff that they left out and left in. It was pretty striking, and I still believe that the guy who was mentally disabled probably didn't do it, but the other guy, man, they left out some stuff. I felt completely cheated by that
That's
Yeah.
documentary afterwards.
and the fact that it's a documentary, that's what's really interesting. Because when you say documentary, to me, that means the full history, right? Because if you're talking about a criminal case, there's things that the public isn't released. There's, a judge gets to decide what each party gets to hear and what gets released. But documentary, I always feel like they're going to do the full dive. And so when you feel like you got cheated on that, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about Petra because um, she is, as we talked about, she's in this industry that's rapidly changing, and she is looking at getting fired. She's looking at losing her job, and I think you do such a good job of investigating those feelings that whether it's journalism or anybody in the last few years that has gone through upheaval in their professional career. And I thought that was really an interesting emotional journey. And on top of that, she's a first generation immigrant. And that just added so many layers. And so I was wondering where this rich character came from.
Well, I work in television. I'm a television writer, and what that means is, like all television writers, I've been laid off. I've been laid off
Mm.
more than once. I've been laid off 4 times. And man, it does not feel good. And you might know that, you're laid off because a new head writer came onto the show and he wants to they want to hire their own people. Or there might be some reason that might have nothing to do with you, really. But still,
Oh,
oh my God, it's such a tough feeling. And you just go through everything. So yeah, so I had experienced that. It's one of the most difficult things that I've ever experienced,
mm,
and so I got to explore that in the character of Petra, who was feeling these same things, and I really enjoyed it, and it just made me love Petra. It just made me love Petra. And some people will say, "How could she do this and that?" And I get it. She does a lot of bad things,
yeah.
um, she turns good at the end, but she does a lot of good things in the middle, and it's like,
That's
man,
what
I
we
love
like
her.
her, though.
I don't care. I don't
Yeah.
care. I'm
And a
with
lot
her
of the
all the
time
way.
I mean, I feel like she was fooling herself too. Like she really
Yeah,
wasn't as bad as it came across sometimes, because
yeah, yeah. She's
I liked her
that's
too. There you go.
yeah, that's good. I just loved her. Yeah. The first generation part of it is interesting to me too, because I know a couple of first generation people who are trying to kind of jump the usual run of things, which is usually, like in my own family, people come to this country and then the children get like a nice middle class job. They're garbage men, policemen, nurses, teachers, good middle class job. And then the generation after them dares to dream, of big things. And I know a couple people who are in their 20s, early 30s, who are like their first generation. Their parents came to this country and they were born here, and they dream big dreams. They want to be big Hollywood directors. They're trying to do this, and it's difficult because they might not have the money, let's say, to have a summer internship. So all their buddies at Chapman University or wherever it might be that getting internships at nice production companies for the summer and are getting paid nothing. Well, these folks can't do that. They've got to make money or take care of their siblings. They don't have that option. So I just find it interesting the folks that just that have that dream anyway, despite
Yeah.
that part of it.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was the first generation part of it that interested me.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool extra layer in there. And then the other thing I thought that was really interesting, you mentioned about Petra that, we kind of love to dislike her for a while and she does redeem herself, but then she's the juxtaposition is that the victim, right, who she liked had some pretty loathsome qualities as a
Yeah, that's true.
or
Yeah.
as a reader, that's what I thought, as a alt-right YouTuber. And so I thought that was such an interesting um back and forth to create. And that was pretty
Especially in
cool.
this, day and age where everything's one side the other. Now we have people that are opposites, but not. They're
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I tried to write it in such a way that people of all political stripes would enjoy it, except maybe alt-righters might not like it that much. But just to like a straight up conservative
Yeah.
person, the majority, I think, still of the Republican Party, will like it, and liberals will like it, and they'll
Oh yeah.
and it'll
Mhm.
just be alt-righters won't. But it was interesting. I did some studying on how people get involved in these extremist political groups, whether it's whether it's ISIS or whether it's certain branches of QAnon and the alt-right, these very
Mhm.
extremist groups. And it seems they offer a sense of community to people. So I
Mhm.
think that's what it offered to Olivia. And Olivia, not to do any what do you call it, spoilers, but she had she had some things going on in her personal life as she was a teenage girl that were not that positive,
Right.
and so she had a lot of anger that she had to put somewhere,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
so the alt-right gave her a place to put it.
Yeah, they present themselves
Yeah.
to the right people at the right time, it seems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's take a little segue here. This is where we usually have a little glass of wine, or
Oh,
drink
okay.
wine,
Well,
sorry, not an entire glass. So we'll all have our water and
all
her
right.
rosé. We'll live
Very good.
vicariously, Christy.
It's de-alcoholized. Come on.
I
All
just
right.
want to make you say that again. So this is
I said it better that time, didn't I?
you did. You're getting better at it, Matt. This is the what we call the question in a bottle. It's a fun question that you might get to the bottom of a bottle. And
Yeah.
I don't know what she's going to pull out. So
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
very good.
here we go.
Okay. What would you do if a stranger in a limousine handed you an envelope with $100,000 and drove away?
Wow.
Oh,
That's a
that
good,
has a sort of a moral aspect to it as well, I would say. It's-
that's a great question. Well, I would say if I was afraid of getting caught, I would give it to, I would think for a while, am I going to get caught? And if I was afraid of getting caught, I would call the cops. And if I wasn't afraid, you know what I would probably do? I probably, I probably, I'd probably ask my wife.
I was just gonna say, you're laughing before you answer. This is gonna be good.
I would ask my wife. Might also call up a couple of close friends
Yeah.
and ask for their advice that I trust, and and then I would take it from there.
That's a great premise, actually, Christy, for someone
Yeah.
out in Matt's world to create a TV show. It feels like, or a good novel. That's a pretty wild thing. What would you do, Christy?
Oh no, I'm asking you first. You can't ask me first. I'm like trying to think. I'm like, I don't know. I'd be very tempted to use it, but at the same time, it's like, it's a good question because it depends on the strangers in a limousine. All right, so that means that they have a lot of money, and maybe I looked really poor. I tend to dress down a lot, and
Oh, you look pretty good.
yeah,
So you're
I mean, it's a
thinking of giving
t-shirt.
it
I'm
to you
wearing
as
shorts with stains on them, but that's okay. Nobody can see that.
you're the premise that you surmise is that they gave it to you because you looked like you needed the money. Is that what you're saying?
Sure, and they're just very generous, and it was probably the holidays, and so I would give a lot of
Wow.
it to charity, and then I would pay some bills and take a trip.
Okay, so this is very interesting because this means
I don't know exactly that I would do that, but
it
I'm
makes
just
you presume the premise because, like Matt said, he's like, I mean, am I going to get in trouble here? To me,
I
it feels like you're
know.
becoming a
It's like, is this
accomplice to a
candid
crime.
camera?
That's funny.
But I
That's
imagine if
true.
you went to the cops and they just said, well, they gave it to you, then you'd probably be justified. Like they're not going to say, oh, we have to take your money that they gave you. They would be like, okay, well, if we hear of somebody having 100,000 in an envelope stolen or something, we'll be in touch with you. Think?
That's what I would do. I would put it in a safety deposit box.
And
And
Just
wait a
sit
while.
quietly. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
wait a while.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think I'd probably tell the IRS if I decided to keep it.
Okay, and you know what? That's our little clickbait for our social media. Matt Witten hides from the IRS.
Yeah. Just what he needs right now.
So listen to our podcast to find out.
It might
You know,
get me
that
more readers if people heard that.
I would think it probably would. You know, it's funny as it reminds me of the Powerball lottery. It's a huge number again today. I saw on the news, and whenever I hear about those winners, I always hope that they're in a state where you don't have to reveal publicly who you are. You know, some states they make you,
Oh, really?
you know, yes, and
I
some
didn't know
states
they
allow you to
made
be
you. I thought you
anonymous.
could be anonymous.
It depends on the state's laws. And I don't know what South Dakota is or California or Florida, but I always thought that would be the last thing I would do is tell anybody just because it would complicate your
No,
life
yeah.
very
First
much.
thing I do is go get, an attorney or something and make sure
Yeah.
it's all legit in the bank or, avoiding as many taxes as possible. And
You and Matt are on the same boat. Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm excited to talk to Matt about all the writing he does because he's not just a novelist; he is a screenwriter, a
oh,
playwright, and on your website, Matt, you have a little tab for writers, and so of course I'm a writer. Christy's a writer. I immediately went there, and one of the first things you share is your writing routine, and I don't know if that's still accurate, but you share your writing routine. It's a early morning 45-minute bike ride, which is very impressive. Then
especially
to a
in
cafe.
South Dakota because of the snow.
Yeah.
45 miles or 45 minutes, I could really cover some
Yeah,
ground
you
here.
could do it on your Peloton, right?
Yeah. But and then you go to a cafe where you do your writing, but then you also like to converse with other writers. And I was completely taken by this because one, I'm in South Dakota. I do not have a large community of writers around me. If I go to a cafe, there's a lot of students, but not a lot of fiction writers necessarily. And so I love the idea in California that you can go to a cafe and there's just fiction writers everywhere. And so I want to talk to you about that. If my idea actually matches the reality. And then two, why do you think both readers and writers are so interested in hearing about other writers' writing routines?
I guess because sometimes it's so hard to get into it to start in the morning, to really get down and get to your desk or your computer and really start writing.
Yeah.
So I guess everybody wants to know how to
Yeah.
motivate yourself to do it and how to get yourself to do it.
I know
Because, you know,
that's
it's
why I do.
interesting.
I mean, I want to ask everybody, like,
I do
yeah.
too. We love that, and everybody. That's one of the most popular questions we hear from listeners. That, you know, we're like, what would you like us to ask? Ask them about their writing routine, whether they're writers or not. But you know what? It's interesting. I don't have many people ask me about my day job. Like, how do you get into it? Like, what's your routine to do your day job? Right? Like, you know, my husband's an eye doctor. Nobody asks him, how do you get into seeing your patients? You know, like, there's no
I'm going to ask him that the next time I see him.
Right? There's not a lot of
these
interest.
mantras
like,
in the mirror or something, you
right.
know.
How do you start? Or your
eyes are my life.
Right? How do you pull up to your first plumbing job of the day? Like,
I gotta
that's such
feel
a
it.
yeah, it's interesting. I think that's really interesting because it's not, there isn't a tactile thing, and so you have to find your way. And so you did find your way, it sounds like. Is that still what you're doing each day?
Yeah, it is. I do like
writing?
this. It is. I do like to start out with exercise. It gets my mind going. And then when I'm at the coffee shop, I'll see, you know, some of my friends there, fellow writers, usually screenwriters, but sometimes fiction writers. And so I get a little bit of socializing because, you know, when I'm at home writing in the morning, I'm just by myself. Actually, I was at home this morning writing because it was raining so much. We usually don't get rain here in Los Angeles. Um, uh, but when I'm at home writing in the morning, there's a tendency for me just to feel lonely, cranky, and just you know, like that. But if I get out first thing in the morning and it's a beautiful bike ride and coffee shop's pretty and there's lots of nice people there and you know I know a lot of the people and a lot of the people know me, so I feel like my favorite things in the world are well exercising and especially when I can listen to a podcast while I exercise, which is what I do. Listen to a podcast during my whole bike ride, and then socialize. And then when it gets down to writing, like I've kind of eased into my day a little. I've kind of had a lot of fun, so it's like I'm not feeling bad that I haven't had like fun. And then it's like, eventually I get to, oh, what am I going to do? Oh, I think I'll write. I did just kind of ease into it and I start. Now that routine is good for me because I don't have a day job. So if I try to look back and remember how I used to do it when I had a day job, I probably could not do such a lengthy warm-up period, before I wrote. That was probably a little bit more of like, just drive to the coffee shop on the way to work and then write for an hour and a half and then keep going, or then keep going to my workplace. Or if I was at home, I don't remember. I just did it, I guess.
Well, now, do you are you like now? Do you work on both? Like you're working on a screenplay for the Hallmark movie or whatever? Are you still working on that? And then you're also writing, I'm guessing, another novel.
Right. Yeah. I'm usually able to do 2 projects at once, and then if I have 3 projects at once, then my brain starts to go in the fritz. So for instance, Killer Story comes out in 2 weeks. I'm doing a fair amount of work on publicity. So that's one thing. And then I've got the Hallmark movie, which I'm also working on, which is 2 things. And so the novel that I'm writing had to take the back seat for a while. So that's what I'm doing. I can do 2 at once.
Which do you like better? Novel or screenwriting, or they're just totally different?
They are very different. Usually I like novel writing better because it's totally my passion and it comes from my heart. When I've written for TV, and I like all these shows that you mentioned at the top of the show, House and Pretty Little Liars and Law and Order and these other shows. I like them. They're not from my heart, so it's not as and every episode that I write, I definitely try to make it from my heart and put all of myself into it and all my soul into it and really understand the characters and love them and care about them and everything. But still, it's not as deep for me usually. So for that reason, I like novel writing. I also like, I like to be by myself. Even though I like to be at the coffee shop, I like to be by myself. Having said that, I just wrote this NBC pilot. We just turned it in. I had such great collaborators. I was working with a co-writer named Charlie Craig, and I was working with the studio, or I guess I am working still, with a studio called Madison Wells. So two people named Amanda and Rachel Slane and Amanda Palmer.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave me and Charlie such great notes, about what we were doing, and it was like really the best collaboration of my life. Maybe it was just such a great
Wow.
collaboration.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
so fun.
yeah. So when you get a really good, Pretty Little Liars was another great situation. I mean, I love that writer's room. The people in there were just all so wonderful, and you never worried about saying something dumb.
Mm-hmm.
There was like you just felt totally comfortable. And
Like for instance, I know this really great podcaster named Christie that would be perfect if we just built this character around her.
there we
They'd be
go.
like, oh yeah, right. Well,
They'd
how's she
fly you
gonna
out on the
fit?
next. They'd fly you out on the
That's
next plane.
that's so interesting that you can um collaborate in different ways, because I imagine each group that you collaborate with has its own dynamic,
Yep, for
like what you're
sure.
just describing. And then you can also write solo, and you can kind of go back and forth between the two. And I think that's really interesting.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And writers' rooms are like any kind of social situation. Like, so I was there once on some writers' room. I think it was Women's Murder Club. And like everybody was talking about Project Runway. And I was like, what the all right. So finally I forced myself to watch Project Runway, and so I could get in on it. And I loved it. Man, I just got obsessed with that show for about 5 seasons. Became totally fanatic. And my wife's best friend from back east, who I never really connected with, and I don't think she really liked me that much. Anyway, we went back east once. She's a fashion designer and so on. And I'd never really cared about fashion design. Anyway, so I started talking to, I said, Gaby, I've been watching Project Runway. It's so interesting. So I started to talk to her about fashion for like an hour. And you can see her like eyes kind of light up, like, oh, this guy that my best friend married isn't such a no good Nick after all.
Yeah. He
There's
knows
something to him.
fashion.
He knows fashion. He's not just she had it in her mind that I was like just some football guy or something.
Yeah.
So like me and her, like we became best friends, and my wife felt like a third wheel that weekend because but anyway,
All because of the writer's room.
Yeah.
all because of the writers' room at Women's Murder Club. So yeah, every situation is different, and so anyway, there's joy in a really good collaboration, and there's joy in just writing a novel on your own that is just what you're most passionate about. So they're both good.
I
Well,
love that.
fun.
All right, Christie has a final question
Oh, yes.
for you, Matt.
Okay.
Okay.
So, we asked this of all the writers, and it is, which of your characters would you like to share a meal with, and what would it be?
Wow. God, in terms of what it would be, I usually eat salmon when I'm eating fish. I hardly
I
ever
got
eat sea
salmon
bass.
tonight in the fridge.
Oh, salmon is the best.
Yeah.
I hardly ever get sea bass because it's kind of like expensive. But I think I would probably have sea bass just because that's what I like. I don't know. That's what I
Why
would like.
not?
And yeah. And as to what, maybe some asparagus. And as to what character that I've written would I most, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is Petra. I would just want to say, Petra, you've had some tough time in your life. It's okay. Don't blame yourself for it and all kinds of crazy stuff. And, just treat yourself well. It's going to be okay. Just kind of.
Yeah.
Good advice.
Have some fish and relax.
Have some fish. Give yourself some grace. We'll have some sea bass. It's all good.
Great.
All right. So, Matt, when our listeners want to find out more about you and more about Killer Story, which is such a great title and cover, where should they go to do that?
MattWittenWriter.com. And that's
Perfect.
Witten with no H.
Okay.
Right.
Like witty.
Right. Very good.
Witty.
That's what
Witten.
Christie said before we got on. She said, we're talking to a really witty guy, and his last name is Matt Witten.
You spell it backwards and it's almost nitwit. So.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. Well, thanks for joining us. This has been such a fun conversation.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it also.
Absolutely. So I think we'll just our final cheers and to much more
There she
success.
Yes.
To you too.
Cheers.
To you too.